And welcome to the first episode of Dylan and I haven't actually totally come up with a name yet for the podcast, but it's a work in progress. It's very loose. But anyway, it's the first episode of our pod, and we're here to talk all things sports with some pop culture highlights thrown in. And very excited to get rolling on this.
Yeah, we'll think of something at some point. So, but yeah,
possibly run a contest on Twitter with, merch giveaway that we actually don't have a logo for yet.
Exactly.
It's 2020, just full chaos. We're embracing it.
Exactly, just like last night's game.
Oh my god.
The Lightning and Blue Jackets. I thought it was hilarious. It started before the Stars. What, 2.5 hours before the Stars game, and then it ended probably 2.5, 3 hours after the game. So, yeah.
It literally, there's a moment when I was writing in my Stark reminders column for Defending Big D last night of the Stars game started and ended while Tampa Bay and Columbus were still playing in overtime.
Yeah.
Just the bonkers ness of all of that was so fun. I was just sitting there in the third period watching Dallas just turtle as they do, and had the Tampa Bay game on the TV and just kept going up and down between my laptop and the TV, and finally just ended up just watching the TV and just occasionally doing the live tweets of still no change in the third.
Yeah, I had my laptop over here, had the Stars game over here, and then I had my middle monitor was the Tampa Bay and Columbus game, and I found myself looking at Tampa Bay and Columbus more. I'm like, it's just wild. I think the last time I saw that was, it had to be Chicago and Nashville. Was it 3 or 4 years ago?
And there was a wasn't it one of the AHL playoff games 2 seasons ago? Went to,
I think it was Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I can't remember who they were playing.
Mm-hmm. It was, I want to say it was somebody from the central area, but I just remember all of the SB Nation, the group chat, just all of us going, will it ever, especially for the guys on the East Coast who it was 1 or 2 in the morning by the time it finished.
Wasn't there one in Charlotte too that went really long?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was Charlotte and Syracuse. I think that was. For some reason, all that's flooding back to me right now, and I can remember it off the top of my head.
I think overtime chaos in hockey has kind of become a defining moment for 2020. My best friend's doing her master's up in Illinois, and she went on her second or third date with her partner, and it went to 4 overtimes, and then they had to reset and play another game against the same team for some really convoluted standings reason. And they literally, everyone was in the stadium until 5 a.m. And then the next day was when everything shut down and quarantined. And she's just I don't know if I will ever see daylight again.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever see my girlfriend again. I'm well, great epic marathon date, to get you through however long quarantine's going to be.
Oh, exactly. Oh.
So yeah, that was highly entertaining to, be getting the live updates in our group chat from her, just eventually in all caps, just yelling, "Someone let them go to bed."
Exactly. I'm I don't know how tired these guys are, because just me skating for 30 seconds, 35 minutes at a time is just exhausting. I don't know how they can do it for 5.5, 6 hours.
Right? I can do, before knee surgery, I could do an hour and a half on a rowing machine at like flat out and be mostly fine but dead afterwards. I can't imagine playing literally 5.5 hours of a hockey game.
Yeah, 2.5 games.
I can't.
You're conditioned to play 1, but then no, surprise, you play 2.5.
Yeah. And just, the moment of, my mom, who is finally getting back into hockey outside of, the Calgary guys that she loves. Thanks, Mom. Her texting me during the game, and she's like, "What is going on?" I'm trying to explain to her what's happening, and she's like, "I feel like I need to be rooting for Tampa Bay." And I'm like, "Yes, it is your duty as a, Spokane resident to root for Tampa Bay." And she's like, "Wait, remind me again, which of the Tampa Bay guys is ours?" She's like, "We grew up across the street from his family. Come on, Mom."
Which one was that? Or is he still playing?
Tyler Johnson.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he played with the Spokane Chiefs in the minor leagues and was undrafted until he was 20. He was about to age out and was in the playoffs with Spokane when former GM, Steve Eiserman, called him and said, "Hey, come put on a Tampa Bay sweater and tryouts. Let's see what you can do." And he spent, I think it was less than a full season with their AHL team and has become, kind of a, one of the center players for them of really, really important. Slightly worried about the Seattle Kraken taking him because he's a hometown kid and he loves everything sports related from Washington. But I also wouldn't be terribly upset to see him in games 3 hours from where I live, being able to drive to go see hockey games instead of flying.
Yeah, exactly. Flying across the country. Instead, you're driving another state away.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, we do that drive a lot, to see friends, to go mountain biking. Seattle is our halfway stop when we go up to Whistler for things. It's just to be able to go and see a hockey game there. Yeah. Oh my God. My poor partner the other night, we're watching, I think it was episode 2 of The Last Dance, the Bulls documentary. And there's a shot of the Bulls walking out of KeyBank Arena after they played the Seattle Supersonics in the 90s. And I paused it and just had this moment of hyperventilating. And he's like, "What?" Is it do you have another memory of watching this team as a child do this? And I'm like, "Well, yes, but that's where the Kraken are going to be in a year." You can just look like, calm down.
Yeah, it's look a little different, but it's basically the same.
They literally just took the KeyBank signs off the top of the stadium 3 weeks ago. That stadium has not changed since the Sonics left.
Yeah.
So still bitter about that. It's been 14 years, something like that, and I'm still bitter the Sonics left.
Yeah, I got a friend he's from Seattle too. He's from Seattle too, and he's ever since he's "I want bring the Sonics back, bring the Sonics back." I'm like, I don't blame you. So instead of having one up, there, now it's I have one, probably 4 or 5 hours from me instead. So.
Right. And then I wish it had gotten more traction, on Twitter, the campaign of name the hockey team the Sonics.
Yeah.
Just, in memoriam of the Supersonics.
Yeah.
The Seattle Sonics on ice. I'm like, that would have been so rad and hysterically funny if the basketball team ever did come back, because they couldn't just give them the name again. They'd have to do something else. So
yeah, the whole
that was fun.
The whole Vegas Golden Knights and then the Army, all that stuff would have gotten into that again, but yeah.
I just love that the fans are calling themselves crackheads and the arena's the crack house.
That's
the most grunge Seattle thing.
Yeah, it's a low-hanging fruit, but yeah, it's totally a Seattle thing. Even though I've never been there. Nobody knows that.
Nobody knows that. I mean, when the pandemic's over, come stay with us. We'll take you up for a game. It'll be during the regular season, so you can come see the Portland Winterhawks play.
Yeah.
Just yell at all of the hockey things. It'll be great.
Yeah.
I have a feeling next season, the kids are going to be "Yo, road trip, let's go see a game." And I'll just be to be 17 and still have energy.
Yeah, exactly. About to turn 25 and I feel like I'm old. I need to take a nap and I'm just this is terrible.
It's so funny whenever, in quarantine, one of our friends, goes, "I'm so tired." And I just look at them over FaceTime, or if it's, spaced out on our back deck or on the fire pit. And I just look at them and I go, "You have no room to talk." And I'm the youngest one in our group by my partner's 5 years older than I am. And he's the youngest out of everybody.
Yeah.
And so I always say, "You have no room to talk." And they give me this funny look and I go, 1, gray hair. That started in college. 2, my knee joint is done. I have the knee of a 50-year-old. So and they all very quietly go, "You win."
Yeah, fine. Oh.
Yeah. The pride and joy of recovery has been one of our closest friends coming to visit, and he had open heart surgery when he was really, really young. So he has that massive open heart scar. And he looked at my knee and went, "Oh my God, you win the scar contest." I was like, "Yes." And then I went, "Wait, should I be proud of this?" So yeah, welcome to quarantine. Sports and part bionic sports writers now. It's great.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine. I know it's just hard for me, not having sports for 3-4 months until, of course, NASCAR came back in May, but not a whole ton of people watch that. But all the major sports started coming back a couple months ago, and I'm Yeah, for me it was hard, but I couldn't imagine like with you recovering how hard that was.
I will admit the first 2 weeks, I was so out of it, like, the world could have ended and I would have been clueless. Like, I just God, that first 2 weeks, I think all I did was binge Star Trek and Death in Paradise and then sleep. Outside of there was a moment about week 3 where I just got really, really sad, and I think it was also the painkillers kicking in. It was just, I haven't been out of the house in months for anything fun.
Yeah.
This sucks.
Yeah.
And then my poor mother going, she had come down from Spokane to help take care of me. She's like, all right, get in the Jeep. We're going downtown. I'm like, why? She takes me to the local, pen and stationery shop and buys me, a new fountain pen and a couple of 1,000-piece puzzles. And I'm like, we're good. We're all good. I can do another 3 weeks of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard, going through that without sports, because I thankfully for the first surgery in November had sports to just kind of get buried in recovery. And the distraction of no matter what sport it was, just being able to turn it on, get out of my head and just enjoy something. And with this recovery, which for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter or are new to me, I had to have a pretty massive reconstruction of my left knee in June. So we're talking bone and cartilage graft. There was about a quarter of my kneecap that they had to replace. And then realigning my kneecap. So having to cut and move the part of your shin bone where your kneecap tendon attaches and then screwing it into place further over so that your kneecap rotates up and basically where they put the graft doesn't grind anymore. So 2 surgeries in one, basically.
Jeez.
And yeah, coming home from that, I was I was feeling it. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. And not being able to go like turn on the TV, put on the Cubs game, and just chill. It was like missing a step, made worse by the fact that I couldn't actually take those steps. The moment the NHL announced the return to play, I was really nervous about, the bubble and quarantine and how that's going to work. And then when I put on that first hockey game, I just felt this moment of like, oh my God, I think I actually might cry. Sports are back.
Yeah.
Just very quietly weeping into one of my hockey sweaters. There's been a lot of crying in like post-op of just the little things make me really happy all of a sudden. And also the crying of, my 13-pound cat walking across my knee 4 days after surgery and just going, yes!
Yeah. Nope, that's not good. Don't need that.
I will say she took on 100-pound lab like day 2 after my surgery to stop him from getting on top of me. I'm sitting on our sofa bed in the living room, and our friend we'd been kind of quarantining with, our little bubble, he came to see how I was doing and brought his dog, and his dog has never seen our sofa bed out. So he does that like bounding lab run when they're really excited. And it's there's a new place for me to sit. This is so cool. And everyone in the room froze because we're like, shit, this dog's about to get on our bed and like literally land on top of me 48 hours after I've come home from the hospital. And the next thing we know, my 13-pound cat is just planted on the edge of the bed and lets out this like death howl at this 100-pound dog, and he just sits and doesn't move. It was so funny. I'm sitting there going, one, I didn't know my cat could make that noise. 2, you get treats forever.
Yeah, you saved mom. You're the best.
Yeah, she loves mom, and all of the cuddles like next to me, but not like right on top of me until like this week she finally started like cuddling like against my knee again. I'm like, 8 weeks. 8 weeks. It's bad when your cat thinks they're gonna break you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
I feel like my laptop's about to break with the Stars games coming back, because like I turned it on for the first time in I think the last time was the last away game that they played, and then I turned it back on, and yeah, it's not. I need to get a new one. Yeah, it's these. I mean, these Stars games. I've been. Luckily, the last one was the best one that they played so far, but besides that, they've just been yikes.
It's been painful to watch. It's actually really weird, but I've been live tweeting and watching all but one of the games since they return. Normally my managing editor has a recap and Twitter duties for the home games because she's in the press box for them. And then I do the road games. And with life in the bubble in Edmonton, she's like, you can take as much as you want. I'm like, great, I'll take all of it. Give her like a real off season since she puts in so much work. And just sitting there watching these games and going, I feel like me watching all these games back to back is compounding my sense of, my God, they're not playing the way they used to. But also I'm starting to wonder, did I just miss that in some of the home games I missed throughout the season? That this is how they've always been, not just play like this, eventually play really good, play like this, be good again. And it's just, oh my God. I don't know if the Jekyll and Hyde inconsistency was worse or better because there were breaks in it.
Yeah, it's like, see, I wonder if I get that too, because it looks like they play good at home sometimes. And then when I watch them on TV, it's like, this is the same team that I watched for 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours here in Dallas. So
yeah.
But then again, I've seen them play horribly at home, and then you see them go on the road and they play really well. So.
I will say, or brag, the Stars games I've been to in person, they've won, and hilariously, it was, what was the last one I went to? Oh God, it was against the Oilers. It was a couple of years ago, start of 2018, and they played the Oilers, and just, they were like up, I think it was like 3-0 or 4-0 at the end of the first period, and we're all just like, this is like the first season with Hitchcock as coach again, and so we're all like, what? And then the end of that season happened, but
yeah,
yeah, that was quite the interesting turn of events that season. Yeah, it feels like the swinging door of coaches with Dallas the last 3-4 seasons now, because Hitchcock was only head coach for one season, and then we had Montgomery for one and almost a half.
Yeah.
We've had Bonus for a half now, and I really, really hope Bonus is not going to be head coach come return of next season. I'm still very much campaigning for Gallant, Vegas former head coach to get the job. I think he would be great for Dallas, but he Bonus seems to think that the Stars are playing good hockey. They're definitive hockey. Management clearly seems fine with him. Granted, there's not much they can do. They can't just fire him in the bubble and bring someone in because it's a bubble. But it is interesting that in a post-game presser, the win over St. Louis, the shootout win, and he said, I feel good about it. We played Stars hockey. We looked good. And I went, that's what you call Stars hockey.
Yeah, I think I put out a GIF afterwards. I'm just like, okay. I mean, yeah, I know that is the type of hockey that they're playing, but it shouldn't be. I know you want to be defensive first, but you want to have offense too. And at the time, that was the best they played, but they didn't put out a ton of offense. They haven't this whole return to play. And
it was that one desperation goal from Pavelski in the St. Louis game. That was the only reason they won that game. And then Hudobin standing on his head in the shootout. Thank God. My mother may be a 40-year Calgary Flames fan, but she loves Anton Hudobin.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, who could? Honestly, who could?
Right? It's so funny on Twitter. She follows, and her following, most of which are, criminal justice and legislative reform, because that's her field, that's her background. And then occasionally sports accounts creeping in because of me, because she's like, I want to be a supportive mom, retweet your articles. And I'm like, great, here's people to follow for context. And so she tweeted me, I think it was during the Colorado game, why is Dobby trending and people are saying they don't deserve him? And I just went, okay, let me explain.
we're not a good enough team for him.
The goal happened.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not a good enough team for him. He's so good, but we're not.
And he's definitely going to Seattle next summer. There's no way he's not. I mean, he's a UFA next summer after the 2021 season. And the Stars, with their salary cap issues and the bridge deals they're going to have to give the younger guys at the end of next season, there's no way they can afford to keep him. So I think, and he could be a starter in Seattle, right? He that whole fan base could fall in love with him. And I'm sitting here going, I'm talking myself into this so that I don't cry thinking about him not being in Victory Green.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I'm like, I don't want to imagine a world without Anton Hudobin as a star.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a lot of Colorado fans back in the day when Patrick Waugh like went, see ya. They were just like, no, don't make us do this.
Exactly. But his was more of just like all right, peace, I'm out, instead of like he was forced out because of other reasons. Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah. Of course,
and it'll be more bittersweet if that's the way it happens, with contract stuff and the expansion. But I think he is probably I hate to say it this way, but like the easiest player for the Stars to lose on their roster in the expansion draft, just because the pickings are good, right? Contract, timelines kind of lining up for all of this to happen. The money, everything else, and he is going to be, I think, one of the best goaltenders available to take at that point. But at the same time, I feel like because of what happened with the Vegas expansion, everyone's like, oh, they took middling players or players that were never going to be anything. And that kind of set a tone almost for the expansion draft of like, get rid of your misfits, right? And even though clearly they were proven wrong,
and then you see
I
what
feel
they've
like
done
that's setting a
since.
tone. Yeah, right. They're going to set a tone for Seattle with that, and I kind of worry that people are going to look at the guys picked in that expansion as just easy sell-offs, and I'm sitting here going, look at what Vegas did, right? Like they did the impossible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You take all
Yeah,
these
that
guys
was
that were mid. I don't want to say bad because they weren't bad, but they were guys that didn't really fit or guys that just weren't really performing well, and then they go to a team where that's all that there is guys that feel like they weren't part of their original teams or they just didn't fit, and then they all fit together. It's just weird how it works like that.
And the beauty of all of them going, our teams chose for whatever reason not to protect us. We're the outcasts, we're the misfits, and the team collectively deciding to call themselves internally the Golden Misfits. And that there was an article that came out, I think it was maybe about February. It was when they were kind of storming through, getting really close to qualifying, and everyone's just like, no expansion team has ever done this. And they gave an interview and said, in the locker room before every game, it's personal because there's at least one guy on our roster that came from that team, that team clearly, they say, sometimes we get it that it's just business, but this team didn't care about that they, left them unprotected. And we want to win that game. That guy wants to win that game for personal reasons. And it's personal for us too. So we want to win it for him. So every night is that grudge match basically against the former team. And talk about a heck of a motivation system, man. It worked. And I like to argue, I think it's still working because these guys are just refusing to be status quo in any respect. And they've got, the big guns now with, Patches and Stone and some of the other guys, but it's those middling players, right? Those fourth liners that are still just so good and so fun to watch too. Like that was really fun to see these personalities come out on the ice that they hadn't had a chance to with their former team. That I think was half the beauty of an expansion team, is just getting, allowing fans to see these new guys, even though they've been around.
Yeah, because you see guys, obviously you had Marc-Andre Fleury, he's the star, but I mean, that was kind of more a calculated move that I think they agreed with Pittsburgh for that, but still you had guys like Nate Schmidt and you had like, who was it, Ryan Reeves? Did they get him? No, was that a trade or was
that was trade deadline.
Okay. But you had like guys like Nate Schmidt who had that personality, and you had other guys. I can't remember who else.
Marcia So and a couple of the other guys. The ones that do the Vegas Corvette. They drive it. They trade off who, but drives it before the games. And oh man, and I think too, everyone was so ready to hate them because they're the new kids on the block, and it's Vegas, and I think a lot of people wrote it off as like, oh, only, people living in Vegas are going to be fans, because all of the advertising was come see your favorite team play in Vegas because it's the dead of winter and it's a desert. Right.
Right.
And then unfortunately the tragedy that unfolded in October in Vegas really changed everything because it was next door to the arena, and the Knights, I hate to say it, but in this day and age, you have the money and the influence, you have a social responsibility to help take care of your community and step up. And they did that, but they did it in such a way that it was very clear that it was player driven. And
Mhm.
all of these guys who have lived in that city maybe 2 months at the most and going, we're going to do whatever we can to help, and go and round people up for the blood drive, and working at the hospitals, and all of these different things, and just watching all of these guys make these decisions on their own, but as a whole, and realizing these are good people Vegas has picked, and Vegas is going to be just fine as a team and as a city. And that moment of everyone outside of Vegas going, we love you guys forever for reacting in this way with such heart. And that tells you so much about the team as well, that it's just all heart. And I will never forget covering that home opener for Dallas, sitting there watching it. Taylor was in the box for all of the website stuff, but I was sitting there watching it, and the Stars coming out and standing behind the Knights for the tribute on ice. And I just remember just bursting into tears because it was so powerful that the new kids on the block have all of the love and support that they will ever need, and the city did too. And it just really gave me hope that the league will be really progressive and continue to push for change, and we're
Mhm.
seeing that slowly.
Yeah.
But people like Vegas leading the way, leading the
Mhm.
charge, and Seattle's doing the exact same thing, right? They're making it their mission to really, in their recruitment, recruit basically anybody who isn't like a white guy to work in the front office,
Yeah, 'cause
like
they
for
just those
female scouts. Yeah.
yeah, they just signed, what was it? The first, I think it was the first black play-by-play announcer they
Hmm.
signed.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. And, tons of women in the front office in positions of leadership too. And um Black and Indigenous people of color at every level, and they've been really public about it on Twitter of like, look, we want to address what's going on in the league and try to remedy that with our own team.
right.
Try to set a precedent of look how easy it is because there is all of this talent out here just
Mhm.
waiting for someone to hire them, and scrapping hard to get hired
Yeah.
in a very male and white driven sport.
Mhm.
And yeah, so watching Seattle, kind of make it their own really does give me some hope of like, God, this team's going to be so fun to watch, and just to watch from an operation standpoint, right? Like, watching them at the draft to see how different their approach is to scouting,
Mhm.
because they have new voices in the room rather than the same old white guys that have been scouting games for the last 150 years.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'm really excited and curious to see like if the Seattle scouts come to the Portland Winterhawks games, if they start scouting next season, and if they try to draft local at all in the draft too, that will be very, very interesting to see.
It wouldn't
So
surprise
my
me.
my very quiet hope is some of the kids end up on the team so that their former mama bear can drive to go watch them play hockey.
Exactly. Yeah, speaking of like progressive, what do you call it? Progressivity. I don't know what the what
Progression.
the progression. I guess you could say that. Yeah, progressiveness of it's good to start seeing that stuff like creeping in, because I mean, obviously you want it a little bit higher level, but like especially with I mean, wasn't it against Vegas? Yeah, it was
Hmm.
Ryan Reeves, Robin Leonard, Tyler Sagan, and Jason Dickinson. The four of them kneeling. I was like, to see the transformation of some of those guys, especially Leonard and Sagan, who Sagan said what about a month or so ago, he was like, "This wasn't my problem. I didn't want to speak up on it, but it's our problem now." And it's refreshing to see some of the guys realize that and stand with those people of color in the sport.
And the recognition and the internal maturity that it takes to have that recognition that they have white privilege and they have this incredible platform to use. And you know everything I've ever heard about Tyler Sagan adds up into what we saw in that first statement from him, and then him going to the silent memorial and the protest, that he is a very thoughtful, compassionate, driven human being. And I think, and in his statement, he talked about something about this one was different and just so gut wrenching to watch. And it took a few days for everyone to kind of wrap their heads around what everyone was feeling. And I feel like for at least a lot of us that are white, who might have been quieter on this issue before, we can't do this anymore. This will never change unless we all take part, because otherwise we're complicit, right? Of just I think it was someone on Twitter said it's not enough just to be against racism, you have to be anti-racist, and anti-racist then caught on. And it's a large part of the reason that I finally broke my no politics rule on Twitter. And I really, since the 2016 election, the only politics I've ever really talked about have been relating to myself as a queer woman, or to the disintegration of relations and communications with Iran, because my partner is Iranian Canadian. Grew up in Iran and emigrated to Canada as a teenager, and that has actually gotten me driven off of Twitter multiple times over the years, because people come out of the woodwork and do these stick to sports, not politics, and just, oh my God, I will never forget the Minnesota fan that came out of the woodwork in January when I was talking about, what had just happened with Soleimani's assassination, and talking about just the abject terror we were living with, trying to get a hold of family still in Tehran, and try to make sure everyone's okay, and checking in with the rest of the family. Just a couple of days of just horrific stress, and kind of talking about it's not just this news headline that's in another part of the world. It's very, very personal. And this Minnesota fan came out of the woodwork and went after me for it, and then started tagging like the head SB Nation NHL Twitter page, and like screen capping the editorial guidelines, like the ethics, and trying to say like, look, you need to fire Logan. Like, she's, opened her mouth about politics. And he's self-owned. That was the best part, was like the screen cap of the ethics cleared everything I was doing, because all I was doing was just talking about a personal matter and talking about like, I am not a fan of the occupant of the White House, clearly. And this guy took offense. It was just the funniest thing. But that really reinforced to me of like, I'm never talking about politics again on Twitter. I can't do this. And after the end of May, I went, screw it, it's 2020. Like, I don't want to wake up Wednesday morning after the election racked with guilt that I could have shared more links, I could have donated more and petitioned more, and volunteered more, and have the time now because of the pandemic, right? And I went, there's no going back there. It's not just someone else's problem, it's everyone's problem. And it's one thing to write about, yeah, Tyler Sagan's doing a great job doing this. And I wrote that article talking about his comments, kind of recapping them for readers and explaining why it was a big deal for the league. And then I had this moment of internal reflection and going, if he can do that, then I can do it too, especially because I just sat here and wrote an article talking about why it's so important for white people to speak out. And I've been very quiet, just because for me, unfortunately, there are other issues that were more important, or more, not more important, but more, had more of an impact in my own life, that I chose to speak up about, partly for like self-preservation, because there's only so much mental bandwidth you can give to everything, right? But now I went, no, it's this has got to change. And part of it is because, for those who don't follow me on Twitter, I live in Portland, and Portland has been, it is eerie driving through downtown and seeing the wreckage, and having family call me at 11 o'clock at night and go, are you guys okay? And we're like, what happened? And they're like, there are like plainclothes federal agents just arresting people off of the street for no reason, and come to find out they're ICE. And I'm sitting here going, my partner's Persian, this is fine.
Yeah.
Like, I've said it for 4 years. First time they come after him, I'm putting him on a plane to Toronto again. Like, he gets no choice in this. But and that very odd moment of hearing helicopters going overhead at like 2 a.m. as they go towards downtown from where we live. That has been very interesting. And I think a large reason of why I've been really speaking out about like the Minnesota Wild have done nothing. And all of this started in Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, and the first player to like talk about it was Dumba.
Yep.
on their team.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And they've done nothing to support him and show solidarity. And he was so brave doing that speech before the was it Oilers Blackhawks game, and just that moment, and the fact that so many people reached out to say you're doing something incredible, and that two of his teammates went with him as emotional support, not just to have him have someone to practice his speech too, but to help kind of keep him chill before going on the ice and doing this incredible thing on national TV. And for me, it's like, okay, there are two white guys on that team that I love, in addition to Matt Dumba. Matt Dumba I have always loved, but those two white guys are on my list of players that are all good in my book.
Yeah.
Because they get it, right? They get how to be an ally.
It's weird. It's weird seeing it in different sports too, because hockey, you're slowly starting to see it do it, but you see in sports like basketball, it's everybody is doing it, no matter the ethnicity, no matter the race, religion, whatnot. Everybody's doing it, and you're seeing that in baseball too, because before the opening days, you had what was it? They had a big long piece of cloth. Every one of them held it. Black cloth, yeah.
Yeah. And then everyone on the teams knelt.
Yeah.
Yeah. That something about that video, especially with the speech that was read by Morgan Freeman of, players from, 6 continents and what was it, 26 countries or something. I'm forgetting the numbers, but hearing that speech and seeing the visuals of those, just the lines of players and then all of them kneeling as one, actually really choked me up and went, this sport has issues of its own, right? With criminal underpay and its farm teams and a whole bunch of other things. But to see that they all went in on this, that was, and that they did the same thing that the English Premier League did of putting the patches on their jerseys for the season. And basketball did the same thing. Some of the teams, Portland Trailblazers, Toronto Raptors are the two I've seen the most. I'm not sure if any others have done it, but they have, Portland has Black Lives Matter instead of the guys' surnames on the back of the jerseys. And Toronto is the same. And then some of the jerseys have been different. I've noticed Pascal Siakam has in French a different message. Kyle Lowry has one, I think, about re-education. If I remember correctly, one of the other players has one about, reform for the prison system. Just all of these messages that add up to Black Lives Matter, and we're committed to this. Yeah. I mean, the Toronto president is doing, almost these weekly videos talking about different initiatives. The team, I mean, for crying out loud, the team icon on Twitter is still a raised black fist. That's their icon, and they have not changed it.
Yeah.
And they tweet out every day during practice the pictures of the guys wearing Black Lives Matter shirts, and all of the different ways that fans can get involved. They're doing the thing that sports teams should be doing. Of, we have a position in society, we have a platform, let's use it. And let's give our fans ways to engage with this and re-educate and move forward. And, Toronto could have very easily just checked out. They're the only Canadian team. And yeah, a decent amount of the guys are American on the team. I get that. But they're the only Canadian team. Canada has much, much lower rates of racial violence perpetrated by law enforcement. And Toronto went, the US is in chaos, the world is on fire. Let's just very politely do our own way of changing the world. And then the entire league just went, follow them.
Yeah, because I know
it's working.
I know on the Mavs, I think it's Doncic there's 3 guys, the majority of them have all have equality, but Doncic has it in Slovenian. Porzingis, I don't know what his language is, but he has it in his language, and then a couple of the other guys have it in their native languages too. So, yeah, that's what I've seen as far as the Mavs go. But one of the teams that I follow, the Las Vegas Aces and WNBA, a friend got me to watch them starting last year, and every single day, no matter if it's practice, no matter if it's a game day, they're always talking about, say her name. They'll say Breonna Taylor's name or say this person's name every single day. And like you're saying with Toronto, they have a platform. They're going to say something about it, and they don't care. And
Yeah.
I'm
And
all about
they
that.
refuse to back down despite the comments of, guess I have to quit being a fan. And,
Yeah.
and a lot of the teams following Carolina's precedent from last season of, great, bye, we don't want you here. Like, take that hate elsewhere.
Yeah,
and that is so ballsy. Like, it is just the best response.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny. Like
that makes me really happy.
after that screenshot that I shared of the four of them kneeling, I can't tell you how many like nasty and mean comments that I got. I had to block so
Yeah.
many people. I didn't give them the time to respond to them. I'm like, you'll be how you are, and if you don't, some of them were nasty enough, I'm just like, all right, bye, you're blocked. It's just
Yeah, it's like report, block, done.
Yep.
Yeah. The defending Big D Twitter mentions, whew,
Yeah.
they that was I was actually glad that was the one game I didn't have the Twitter account for. I was so sick after physical therapy that day. I
Yeah.
just had one of my staff do it. I'm like, please take it. Yeah, so I didn't see a lot of it firsthand, but I afterwards logged into the account and just it was still going after the game, just all of the backlash. And I'm like, you guys realize we're not affiliated with the team, right?
Right.
And just, that initial moment of, God, we're never going to change as a society. But then seeing the one thing that gave me a lot of hope was seeing for every racist comment, right, on our retweet, someone else, and it was like 90% of the time, a white person and a white woman usually would jump in and have the counterpoint, like the logic counterpoint, would have the stats to back it up, just would jump in and basically take the job of telling, the racist, sit down, shut up, your voice is not wanted in this discussion.
Exactly. Like,
That moment of despair to hope was lovely.
Yeah, and it was wild. Like at first, like every single message that I saw on that tweet that I posted was all positivity, and then you had the other people later jumping in, and then, like you said, there's always one person that would jump in and be like, "Okay, no, your opinion, this is why your opinion is wrong." So, yeah.
Yep, it's the great reminder of opinions are not the facts. It's great. Yeah, that has been actually really, really nice to see some of that happen. And yeah, the hope for change. Yeah, this off season, quarantine pause, whatever you wanted to call it, I think has been good for a lot of self reflection for a lot of people. I know for me, it's manifested in my my background in my family is politics and lawyers, and I was really kind of like clued into all of that before 2016, and then for my own mental health I just had to like walk away. But I've been in quarantine inhaling book after book, podcast after podcast, documentary after documentary, article after article about politics again, of just specifically our foreign and domestic domestic policy are a mess, which has always been my specialty. So just sitting here like losing it.
Right.
And just having this moment of looking away was fine for my mental health, and everyone needs to do it now and again. But if we want to change as a society, like what we're calling for, we have to be engaged. And yeah, that's led to me becoming an absolute nerd about policy.
Right.
To the point where like my partner, piped off about something with a foreign country. And I just, next thing I know, I'm giving him this like 15-minute lecture about how, like the history of our relationship with that country. And he's just looking at me like, who are you?
Exactly.
He's like, you used to just do this with sports. You like sports and books because you have 2 degrees in literature. Like those were the 2 topics that if I asked you a dumb question, you would give me a full college lecture. And he's like, are politics on that list now? And I went, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Trying to get him to listen to some of the podcasts that I've been like inhaling like air, and he just I've been listening back through chronologically to the Pod Save America and Love It or Leave It podcasts from the guys who are former staffers and speechwriters for Obama. And they started Pod Save America and Crooked Media, their company, right about the time of the inauguration in 2017. And so I started listening back through chronologically, and it's been great for the hilarious moments of, I forgot about that. I definitely forgot about that. Like, I forgot about Scaramucci as like press secretary, just like all of these things. And trying to get him to listen to it. And he's like, guys are really intense. And I went, okay, well, one, they used to work in the White House. You kind of have to be in the White House.
Yeah.
And two, it's the only way we can handle politics right now, with tons of snark thrown in the middle of these incredibly, like deep discussions with like politicians and guest stars and whatnot. And he just looks at me and he's like, this is your brand of involvement. Mine is like The Economist and The New Yorker, like deep dives. I'm like, those are great, but sometimes I just need to like laugh off the rage about politics while crocheting, and this is mine.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like
listening to people have a rant about Sean Spicer while you're just very quietly crocheting is one of the most soothing and odd experiences.
Oh man.
Yeah, it definitely makes up for the sports rants, that I used to do.
Right.
So yeah, my partner's like, wait, has your rant about concussions gone the way of Dusty Death? And I'm like, nope. And he's like, never mind. Backpedaling. Nope. Not asking.
Yeah. Oh.
In lighter topics,
Yeah.
I have an absolutely hilarious story about sports from today. So for those who didn't see my Twitter, I had my 8-week post-op with my knee surgeon today. And it was basically like, take some x-rays, see how you're doing, getting a lecture, all of these different things. But I've known for the last year, my surgeon is a Boston Bruins fan, unfortunately for him. And he, whenever I see him, he asks about, like how the Stars are doing, because he knows that, I cover hockey. And so he does this whole lecture about, like knee healing, goes over the, the x-rays, tells me, updates from what they found when they were doing the surgery, blah, blah, blah. And then looks at me, no like transition whatsoever, and goes, 5 overtimes? Burst out laughing. And I was like, here's the thing. The Dallas game started and ended while they were still in overtime. His like surgeon in residence that's like shadowing him, like this guy's eyes are just getting bigger and bigger. Like, what are they talking about? He very quietly goes, I like baseball. And we're like, honey. Yeah, we were laughing about that. And then he goes, God, it reminds me of some of the games I used to work, back in Providence. And I look at him, he goes, oh yeah, no, I was the team doctor for the Providence Bruins, the AHL team for Boston. I'm like, 1, this explains a lot. 2, you poor thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, and then he's, told me a couple of really hilarious stories behind the scenes of, like some of the things going on, of just the hilarity, when it comes to, sports injuries, and, the fragile sense of, what was it he said? It was the fragile sense of hypermasculinity. And I was just like, I love you.
Yeah.
But this moment of the guy who rebuilt my knee twice now used to like patch up bloodied hockey players in the AHL. This is the best day ever. He's like, yeah, I was doing that while doing my residency and, in Providence. And I'm like, aren't like surgeons in residence usually like exhausted and pulling 80-hour weeks? And apparently he was just moonlighting as a team doctor for like a hockey team. Yeah, that was highly entertaining. He's like, so Dallas can't score, can they? And I just went very quietly, we're not talking about it. Yeah, that I texted my mom after the appointment. I was like, so fun fact, my doctor is a former like hockey team doctor, and told her the story, and she just responds, how's your knee? Like, no updates from like what he was talking about in the the appointment. Just I was telling her all of the hockey related stuff, and she goes, sweetie, it's bad when my mother does that voice over text message.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very entertaining moment today, and coupled in between the like lecture of get out of the brace, and I'm like, it hurts, and he's like, suck it up. I'm like, okay, you were a hockey team doctor.
Yeah.
And the explanation of like what's going on in my knee, and the updates of what they found in surgery, and me just going, I feel vindicated for all of the pain I've been in for 12 months.
Yeah.
Him in November. Yeah, it's just, this, very, very small, part of your kneecap we're going to have to work on. And he said, yeah, when we got in June, the OR team collectively went, oh, shit.
Yeah.
He's like 3 times the size of what we were expecting.
Yeah, it's
So they're
interesting.
going, thank God they over order the size of grafts because they would have been up a creek at that point.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is my hilarious story from a surgeon's office in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, I couldn't there's so many times that I've heard, oh, I used to be part of this team or whatnot. I'm like, huh? And you're just now telling me about this?
Right.
Yeah.
So for the Portland Winterhawks, their equipment manager is everyone calls him Peaches, and is it Brennan? It's Mark something. If I look it up, I'll remember. But he's in the NHL Hall of Fame apparently. And so they convinced him to come out of retirement and like work for the team. And so apparently he has all these great stories, about, like working in the league and, like superstitions from different players about their equipment and, working with it. He's apparently this absolute wizard when it comes to hockey sticks 101 in terms of like, the kids trying to figure out what flex they need, how much of a curve on the blade, all of these different things. And he's just, it's like he's got like a table in his head with all of the data for it and all of the different brands of hockey sticks. And the kids just like love him. And he is very much that curmudgeon-y, older, very much looks like a guy from like First Glance who would have no time for teenagers, and he adores the kids. It's the funniest thing. He'll be like in the tunnel after the games. He'll be walking by with like that like curmudgeon look on his face, even if they've won. And I'll be like, "Hey, Peaches." He's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, the difference in expressions. But yeah, he's my quest to do an interview with him at some point is going to happen. But mostly so I can write an article of like hockey sticks 101. Let's talk about why Jamie Benn's hockey stick is different from Connor McDavid's, is different from so and so, and how it affects their game.
Watch us like get him on on here at some point and do that. That'd be so fun.
Oh my God, right? Yeah. Once we hit our 1 million followers, our master plan.
Yeah.
We need to start doing guest stars. How long before we can get Mark Mathot on here?
Yeah, just ask Sean like, hey Sean, you want to drop us a bone real quick? And
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I feel like quarantine's loosened everybody up, things that they would have said no to. Everyone's like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
we have time.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have to say the update from the WHL that the kids season has been pushed back to the start of December, asterisk for now.
Yeah.
Because it could be next year. For those who don't follow me on Twitter, I'm a host parent, a billet parent for them. So we have 2 of the players live with us during the season, and we'll be getting our kids back for next season. But I started this harebrained idea last season. I crochet a lot while watching sports, and so I made these massive 7-foot long blankets for the 2 I have to take on the road trips because they were complaining that the bus is really cold and whatever blanket they take isn't enough. So I made these incredibly heavy, lovely blankets, and it became a thing. Like the guys in the tunnel after the game would be like, when do I get one? Next thing I know, I find myself crocheting a stack of them. Here's the thing though, to make a 7-foot blanket in the pattern I picked, it takes 20 plus hours of work. On top of like a full-time job and like having 2 teenagers in the house and everything else. And so It takes me like 2 to 3 weeks if I'm crocheting like every night to be able to get one done. And so like during off season, I took some time off, crocheted like other things, and then started in on the blankets, and then had this like, oh shit moment of I got through, I think it was 11 before the end of the season, and I had 12 more to make, and I've got I think like 3 or 4 more done now. But I was doing the math of like how many I would have to make before the kids came back in September for training camp. And, how many I would still be scrambling to make before their first road trip in like October. And then they did the announcement the next day that everything's been pushed back. I was like, thank God. More months.
Yeah.
It's just the stack of crocheted blankets is growing in the guest room closet.
Jeez.
my mom, when she was here, she, was kind of watching me go through the process of making one of them. And she's like, this is really cool. And she's, helped me make a couple of them for the kids. So a couple of them are, like the squares were made by her. And then I'm the one bordering and attaching and laying it all out. And um, billet grandma in enemy territory, as the kids call her, since she's up in Spokane, their dreaded rival.
Mhm.
So they get a couple of blankets by her. And but yeah, doing, the updates in Snapchat to the kids of like the pictures of the blankets, and just knowing that they're going, whose blanket is that going to be? And that's the thing, is like the team doesn't know who's next. Like the guys never know.
Yeah.
The routine was my two would show up for the road trip at like 7 a.m. with a blanket and hand it to one of the guys. And that was the point of like, every time they did a road trip, there was another blanket. And our head coach finally going, you're the one.
Yeah, exactly. Found the mastermind behind it all.
And just, I got the captain of the team. I got his done and gave it to him the morning of what was supposed to be their road trip up to Spokane in March. And that was the day that the league hit pause for the kids. And they came back home from, the arena basically. And so he never got a chance to use his blanket, but he just signed his entry-level contract with Florida. And so I was just thinking, like, I wonder if he's going to take that to Florida. It's probably too warm, but you never know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So here's hoping we see it in some NHL players, like Insta story from the team bus in 2 years.
Yeah.
The spotted bright green. I'm like, that's mine.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, watch. That will be what sets me off on making them for NHL players. I've done that before. So I made Tyson Jost one in Colorado colors, and then I'm walking up to give it to him after practice had this, oh shit, because he's colorblind and can't see red.
Mm-hmm.
And like a third of the blanket is in like Colorado red.
Yeah.
And one of my friends going, no, it's fine. Tell him it's an Avs colors. He'll know what it is. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. I know one of the things that I've been doing, we touched on that. I guess you just recently found out that I've been doing / watching / listening to Hamilton.
Yes.
I can't tell you. Like, I had a friend that was like super into it, and she was talking about. I had barely listened to music. I'm like, it's just not really my thing. And then I watched it. And I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've watched ever. I've watched it twice already. I really need to watch it a third time. I'll probably do that tomorrow. Maybe.
Yeah.
Probably not. But I'll watch it sometime again. I've listened to it probably 3 times through. Like I had, what was it? There was a 2-hour drive up to Wichita Falls, which, if y'all know me, I live in the DFW area, so that's a good 2-ish hours up there. And the play is 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like, if you listen to it if you listen to it like on Spotify, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I listened to a good majority of it on the way up there. That was my third time listening to it. I'm surprised you didn't
slow down the last like 15 minutes just to be able to have.
First of all, I started a little late too, because like it's a 2-hour drive, but I started maybe like 20-30 minutes into the drive. So I still had that. But yeah, I mean, it's just amazing listening to it and then watching it and then just seeing all of it come together. Because I think I listened to it. Did I listen to it first or watch it first? I can't remember. But just no, I watched it, listened to a few songs first, then watched it, and then listened to it again, and it's just amazing how much different like it is, but better to watch it than it is to listen. So,
and like listening to it, it's a complete story on its own because there's enough in the songs that you get the plot, you get what's going on stage, you can live without having to see it physically to get everything in the story. But there's something about seeing the actors do it, especially the ones, because it's the original Broadway cast, right? Getting to see them sing those parts and the acting and the facial expressions. And then like some of the comedic timing too, of like after King George's, was it second or third song? Like one of his servants brings out a stool for him to sit on and he sits and watches, like looking like he needs popcorn to eat as like, I think it's like the election of 1800 happens. Just, that's something you don't get in the audio recording, and it's made so much better watching it. I started listening to it in 16. I was a choir and theater kid in high school, and so my best friend from high school came to visit, and on the drive to the beach, she made me listen to it, and I just fell in love and got to see it when I was on tour in Seattle 2 years ago, with a touring cast, and blown out of my seat by it, teary eyed at the end, and so my mom and my partner and I sit down to watch it. I think what was it, like 3-4 weeks ago now, and I have always, like, Eliza's songs have always been really incredible, and Philippa Sue's range is incredible, but seeing it, like, they never, like, the songs in Spotify never reduced me to the point of tears. It really got me emotionally, but never got me that far. I definitely cried during It's Quiet Uptown in Seattle. I did cry during that moment. But we're sitting there watching it, and I literally, during Burn, and then from the moment Philip dies through It's Quiet Uptown, just sobbing, like openly sobbing. Just her presence on stage, my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know one of the things
yeah.
you're talking about, like that you can't get listening to it, that you get watching it. It's like like once I watched it the first couple times, I started watching YouTube videos on it and like seeing the little intricacies, like the bullet,
Yeah.
like the bullet character, and then I don't know if you ever knew about that, and then the what was it, like little changes that like Groff made. You can't hear it in the Spotify recording, but like
Right.
whenever the first song, when he says everybody, he sings it in the Spotify recording, but then you watch it and he just goes everybody, like he's annoyed, and like someone's like, he's like, it just sounds so much better with like the character like that, him saying it like that, and it's interesting to see the stuff that you don't get in like you said, the recordings, and that was just one of the little things that like watching it and then realizing that I'm like, it just sounds so much better like that, and like,
and one of the ones was Wait For It. That's been my favorite song on the soundtrack forever. And the really interesting visual juxtaposition of him as he's singing, and his vocals rise midway through, right? And it's his version of not waiting for it, of losing control, because he's so controlled and reserved. But in the background, all of the chaos going on behind him, and it's that internal chaos that he's feeling, was just, it just made it so much better.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I told you
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I told you before, like speaking of the characters, like my top 3 is like everyone like rants and raves about Lin-Manuel. I'm like, yes, he's amazing and he's great and he's the whole mastermind behind it, but like seeing some of the other minor characters that like I didn't know before, and seeing some of the other actors like Daveed Diggs. Oh my God.
I love him.
Just his personality, and apparently he's like really shy, like off stage. That from what I've watched and what I've read, but like he's just this whole other, like, I don't want to call him an enigma, but like he's the most dynamic character I think on the Broadway cast, the original cast.
And the two characters he played are so dynamic, integral, and different from one another. And the fact that he could pull them both off, like to pull one of those characters off is incredible, but to do both is just,
and bring that same energy.
I love that they did that. If everyone who was an ally or a loved one in the first half became an enemy in the second half, or a political rival. It's just brilliant.
Interesting. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, because you had, I mean, besides Aaron Burr was like, you could tell in the first act he was sort of like with him, but not really. And then obviously, but yeah, I mean, who was it? I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's a really like, and you know who I'm talking about.
Hercules Mulligan turning into, is it
James Madison?
Madison, yeah. Peggy turning into Mariah Reynolds. And even some of the really like tiny, like one-off, characters, like the guy, what is it? The Farmer's Rebuke. That guy ends up being like, someone else with a really like tiny part in the second half. That's part of the rival faction. The fact that they turn to everybody is wonderful. The kid who played Lawrence, who died tragically young. playing Philip, who died tragically young. It's like, well, that's just a boatload of feels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Oh man. I think the thing that really like made me fall in love all over again with the spectacle that is musical theater was Satisfied. When Angelica sings that, because it's when they say rewind, and I never, like, when in the song you very clearly get that she's telling the story of that night that Eliza met Alexander from her perspective, but then on stage they rewind to that point physically
yeah.
and reenact all of it. It's just the coolest.
I was watching a video. Basically, they go through Satisfied, and then they go through Helpless too, and then they like cut the scenes from Helpless and like juxtapose them against the Helpless, and like you can see exactly what they acted out, like to the point. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to watch. Like you see the same exact things that happen in Helpless, they reenact in Satisfied. So
you can see why it set and broke the number of nominations and wins for a Tony, right? They just nailed it on every level for Hamilton, and it really is the first of its kind, right? You have hip hop and rap in Broadway, like
yeah,
Broadway just
in a historical context, like
exactly.
whoever
Yeah.
thought U.S. politics, rap, and hip hop would all go together on Broadway. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
Like I'm not super versed in like the Broadway like scene, I guess you could say, but it's just it makes me want to get into it more and watch more of it and see the different things that go on. Me being a band kid, I'm interested in music, so but yeah.
The one I always loved before Hamilton came out was Rent. It's like a rite of passage in the queer community, right? Because it's about New York in the 80s during the HIV and AIDS epidemic, and has just some absolutely iconic songs, right? Seasons of Love is like, you say that to anyone who knows Broadway and they immediately know what you're talking about.
Right.
6-part harmony, let's go. But Hamilton is just, who knew politics could make you feel that much, right? And make you laugh and cry and hope and despair and anger, just so much goodness.
Yeah.
One thing I think that you would really love is Obama invited the original cast to the White House.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, I think it was like right after the election. And clearly, end of his presidency, and he and Biden are sitting there in the front row, and then they sing One Last Time of Teach Them How to Say Goodbye. And like, I don't know how Obama did not lose it, but Biden is done, right?
Yeah.
He's just like, there are tears, and watching it and just getting so choked up of, it's about George Washington, and they're performing it under George Washington's portrait, like, but they're clearly singing it to the president that they just love, that the whole cast just loves. That was really, really lovely. And then they did before they did the concert at the White House, they did some other fun things. And so what they did was they filmed after, I think it was after Cabinet Battle #1, where Washington says, Alexander, take a walk, and they walk, and it's the West Wing walk and talk, from the TV show, where you're walking and having a full conversation from start to finish in the span of a walk. And they did that whole song talked out as the West Wing walk and talk. And I just was sitting there, having grown up watching West Wing, one of my favorite shows, and just immediately know what they're doing, and just like, rewind, play again, rewind, play again. And clearly you can tell that Lynn and Christopher Jackson were West Wing fans, because they're just giddy throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, no matter your politics, watching theater nerds who appreciate history and pop culture geeking out about reenacting that pop culture is just so awesome. Yeah. And I highly recommend watching Lin-Manuel freestyle on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
I think I've seen that. Was it
incredible?
After? Yeah. Was it the one after? I think it was a Ham for Ham that I watched. The one with him and Jimmy backstage. It was Jimmy tries to do like Lynn like just fires off like different artists to do, and then Jimmy just the most hilarious ones. Like, what was it? I can't remember who they were exactly, but it was like Michael Jackson. He did one for, and it was going through. Oh, what song was it? Like, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Michael Jackson, David Bowie. He did Bono. That one's the best. Like, I encourage anyone who's like listening or watching to go look that up. The Bono one's the most hilarious thing. I'm not gonna spoil it for anybody, but oh my goodness, it's amazing. So,
Oh man,
yeah.
that's Daveed Diggs doesn't do a whole lot of like talk shows and like panels, but the ones he does, I think he was on the Tonight Show at one point. He was on the Love It or Leave It podcast in 2017. It was part of the Hamilton moment, and then he was starting to launch his music as well. And he's really quiet in the panel, that they're doing in front of a live audience. In LA, he's quiet for a decent amount of it, but when he does speak up, the snark, holy moly. And like the most witty, insightful, it's like Jefferson without the ego.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. And just, he had the rest of the panel just in stitches every time he said something. And just being really kind of matter of fact. And he just put out a new book with Rivers Solomon. I think it came out about 2-3 months ago. And if you look up Rivers Solomon, it will come up with the title and Daveed Diggs' name. It's the new one by Rivers Solomon, but it's basically, it took the stories and the moments talked about in one of his latest rap collections, and they wrote this really incredible story around it that has to do with the history of slavery. And every review I've seen for this book is just like raving 5 stars. And so I am waiting for Powell's to get a copy so that I can go buy it.
Oh.
It's like Daveed Diggs in books. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
I love that whole cast that's just shifted into all of these other areas. Chris Jackson on, what is it, Bull on CBS now. And my mom's watching it. She's like, it's not, it's the guy from NCIS, but his character's kind of a jerk. And she goes, but I love George Washington in it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So we all know my mother's watching that just for Christopher Jackson.
Right.
Yeah. Lots of good pop culture goodness. And Hamilton in this moment, I think, is a really good distraction of,
for sure.
You get to escape for a couple of hours watching just the magic on stage and that set and the revolving floor. Just so many good things.
Yeah. All right. Well, but been about what, hour and 15 minutes of just talking about whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I was sitting there, I'm like, as times keep going up, I'm like, we need to stop. But yeah. Oh.
Let me just reiterate. You agreed to do a podcast with me, knowing that I tend not to shut up.
Yeah. All good, though. All good. So. All right,
the long rambling that is my brain.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I know a couple times you have, 2-3 hour, just ramble sessions. So
on FaceTime, the two of us just I think the last one we did before my surgery, I didn't have my headphones in, and so a rush, my partner heard part of it, and he was just, I think it was the part where we were playing each other EDM songs, trying to see who could guess it first, right? He looks over at me, he's like, "What are you two doing?"
Now we're just making it public.
Don't understand our friendship. That doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, now we're just making it public now. Yeah.
The chirping we're gonna get from this.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well,
my staff writers are just gonna message you and be like, "You were reckless enough to do a podcast with her." They love me on our podcast. The rare times I hop on.
Yeah.
Which might be the reason.
Yeah. This was fun. I for sure want to keep it going. So.
Oh yeah, and we've got to do, once the NBA starts their playoffs, and do updates about that, the MLS tournament, and then updates of whatever craziness is happening from the NHL this time.
Oh, for sure. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Highlight of the night was seeing that Arizona got trounced 3-0 by Colorado. I'm like, that was the team that beat the Predators, really?
Did that just come up, or was it?
It was I think right before we started recording.
Huh.
3-0, and it's just.
Yikes.
I have a lot of salt about Matt Duchene, and so one of my Colorado friends, messaged me and said, sorry, Duchene sucks to suck, and I was just like, oh, the Duchene curse lives on. I want to play playoff hockey, goes to another team. They don't make the playoffs. I want to play playoff hockey, goes to another team.
Yeah.
Nashville gave him the extension, man. They get to lie in the bed they made.
Oh, for sure. Oh. All right.
Now, if the Stars can just, make a bed that's made out of goals and lay in it, I don't know where that metaphor went, but let me have it.
Yeah. Hopefully I can score some tomorrow night, which we were planning on originally recording, but thankfully our schedules both opened up, so we'll both be busy tomorrow, and I'm sure covering that. So I'll be making my gifts as usual, and then you covering it for.
I'll be on the old Twitter machine at Defending Big D and possibly crying into a very large cup of tea by the third period.
Hopefully not, but there's a very real possibility. So.
I feel so bad for everyone in Dallas and like back east, with these for Dallas 9:30 start times. For me on the West Coast, it's really easy. It's 7:30. It's like the normal start time for a hockey game here. And everyone back east just going, please end it so we can go to bed.
Exactly. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks everybody who is going to watch it, listen to it for doing that. Our first episode.
And share it.
Yep. Share it, please. Follow me.
Help us find a name for the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. Follow me at Dean Adders, her at Logan Stark Chell, right?
Yes.
Yes. Logan Stark Chell.
Chell.
And then obviously go follow Defending Big D too. So, and if you want, or you work for, if you want to follow the other one you work for, if you want to shout that out, maybe. Nope. All right.
I feel like Dallas fans are going to come after me with pitchforks and torches. I mean, the Minnesota fans, when we announced last year that I was taking over the site, definitely came out in the comments.
Yeah.
A little concerned about Logan. She's going to sabotage the site because she's a Dallas writer. And I'm like, my dude.
Yeah.
So I am also deputy editor and social media manager like Dallas for the Minnesota SB Nation site Hockey Wilderness, and have kind of been on a little bit of a leave of absence for a couple of months because of my knee, but coming back. But yeah, a year ago this month, my managing editor and I took over the site, and they didn't have a problem with him. He was coming from the Vegas site. Everyone was fine. They're like, dude makes great gifts from the games. We're excited. And then all the comments on our, meet your new editors, all the comments after me, I'm like, just making sure my location's turned off when I'm tweeting.
Exactly.
And then someone messaged me, did you even think before saying yes? I'm like, what do you mean? And they go, Dallas and Minnesota, just think about that. Like, Minnesota has never forgiven Dallas for taking the team. And I went, oh no, what have I done?
Oh.
Yes, Hockey Wilderness is the other one.
Yeah. All right, well, go follow us on all the socials, share it, like it, all that stuff that all the podcasters say. So.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Signing off.
Peace.